Hey everyone, so today I'd like to invite you to have another look at a map of Vienna. It's been a while and I really enjoy looking at these. You can tell this is a bit older. It's from around 1850 and was created by Karl Graf Vasquez, so he was a count. And this one's called Situationsplan der K&K, Haupt- und Residenzstadt Wien, nebst den Ansichten von Wohngebäuden der vorzüglicheren Geschäftsmänner. So it says here on the side, you can also see a couple of residential buildings of excellent businessmen, basically. This is an overview of the city itself, at the time still fortified, and its suburbs that were being slowly integrated into the city itself. You can see the Danube out here, at the time still with many different arms. And while there were dams, this was also an area that often got flooded. So you didn't really have a lot of residential buildings, except for here, the part right next to the canal. Today, this looks very different, but you've already seen that on some other maps. We can also see the Wien River, coming up here, taking a turn and then arriving at the Donaukanal. This one still largely follows the same track, but it's underground for most of the part here, and it runs along the U4 line here. And what I'd like to do today, we can have a quick look at the center, and then I'd like to have a closer look at the second district, and at the fourth and fifth. So let's turn this over, and we're gonna start at the very back. Let's see if this is the right one. No. One more. So Count Vasquez also did a map of Vienna in 1147. And I think this one's really fascinating too, so let's give that one a quick glance. I talked a little bit about the development of the city in a previous video, which I can link if you're interested. And what you can see here really nicely is the original city, which is roughly where there was also the Roman camp beforehand. Today we have the Graben along here, and you can see that the cathedral is just outside this initial city. We also have the suburb Woldseile. Today these would be two streets running parallel to each other, Woldseile and Bäckergasse. So that was the first extension outside of the actual city. And I particularly like they superimposed the lines of the wall from his time. So we get a really nice idea of how small it was. compared to the later city. Here on the side, again, we have a couple of buildings. And this one here is particularly interesting. St. Ruprecht am Ruprechtsteig. This is one of the oldest churches in Vienna. It's really fascinating. It's a teeny tiny church right here, sort of overlooking this area of the Donau Canal, of the canal. It's a little higher, so you need to walk up some steps. And the fascinating part is that around it, today you have the Bermuda-Dreieck, so there's tons and tons of bars and clubs and especially young people going out there all night. And then right in the middle there's this little church. You can go in and it's completely quiet, and they invite you to meditate a little bit, basically, to sober up, you could say. So really charming. I love this. Here's a CD, Schottenstift, which was founded not by Scots but by Irish missionaries. And we have a couple of hunting houses. Jägerhaus 1, 2, 3. And up here there are some Fischerhütten, so the huts of some fishermen. Okay, let's jump back to the start. Gonna go there in a minute. Right, this is the one I want. So this is the inner city during the time of Count Vasquez. Like I said, it's fortified. But you can see here that there's a lot of green in front of the bastions, and this during his time was quite popular apparently, so people would go for walks there, just enjoy the fresh air, enjoy their free time, I guess, in as much as they had it. And we have the Wien here on the side. And this is a bit odd because we can see here it says that north is in this direction, but that's not quite right. We have the Kärntnerstraße coming out here, and this is pretty much south, so north would be up there. But this is a bit of an oddity, but that's fine. Some parts that you are probably already familiar with are right here. The Hofburg, which is a pretty large complex already at the time, and it grew even more in the meantime. What's missing is the Neue Burg right here, where you would find the National Library today. Here we still have the old library, which is open today. You can visit it. And we also have a Münzkabinett. I don't know if this is still here or if it's been moved to one of the other museums. So we would have the Neue Burg here. And then here today we would have the Ring Street, and then two more museums, Art History and Natural History. And the Art History Museum has a Münzkabinett, a coin collection. Might be the one from here. We also, interestingly, have the Stallburg, so this is where the horses are. Until today, we have the riding school, and here we have the K&K Hoftheater, the theatre of the Habsburgs. This one, I don't know if this one burned down or whether it was demolished. Either way, this is gone. And instead we have the large Michaelertor, so this beautiful entrance into the Hofburg. And we can see an example of it right here. There's this tiny drawing with the Lipizzaner horses in front, the white stallions, really cute detail. And this here would have been the theatre. So this building is gone. This still exists, and then here we have the massive gate with the cupola, which fits in really nicely today. So I think the area actually looks better. I guess as far as I can tell, of course I've never seen what it looked like beforehand. We also have a church right here, Michaelerkirche, which would be this one. It doesn't look like much when you walk past it, but this is one of my favorite churches. It's a really lovely mixture inside of different architecture styles, so it's definitely worth a visit. And when you walk down there, this would be Kohlmarkt. That looks very different today. This is sort of the luxury shopping mile up here. Then you turn the corner and you go to Graben. And a bit further up you turn the corner again and you get to the cathedral. And this is interesting. It's a little detail. At the time, the Graben, so this large square, still had houses on each end. Today these are gone, both this one here and this entire section here. These are all gone. So it's more open space and you can just walk through. It's usually very busy. If we take a larger look at this area, you can also really nicely see the outline of the old city. It's quite obvious which way around it went. And then when you look at this part here, you can also nicely see this first extension. At the time, this was Obere and Untere Bäckerstraße, these two streets, with the cathedral being outside. Schottenhof would be over here. What we saw earlier, this would be the Schottenstift. And there's another nice open space, the Vrijung, where you often have a market, and right now there's an Easter market coming up. Definitely worth visiting. So I think it's quite interesting that the city's not only changed right here, where there was a lot of space to add new buildings, but also right here in the center, or you would assume that it carried over from the time. But for example, also the street here, Kärntnerstraße, which is one of the most important shopping streets today, at the time was a lot narrower, so a lot of these buildings were replaced too, to make the street a bit wider. But let's have a look at another part. We spent a lot of time in the first district already. Let's jump across the canal and have a look at Leopoldstadt. At the time, these were still called Polizeibezirk, not Gemeindebezirk. Gern bestehend aus den Vorstädten Leopoldstadt und Jägerzeil And then again we have 14 vorzügliche Ansichten, so exquisite drawings of different buildings. So you have two suburbs. In yellow we see Jägerzeile right here, quite small. And we have Leopoldstadt in pink, which would be this area. And this is the part that I just mentioned earlier. We have the Danube here in the north, and we have quite a lot of wetlands here. So there was very little in terms of permanent settlement. The area was simply too difficult to stay there. But of course, if you come closer to the canal, you have quite a lot of houses and streets here. And if you look closer, you can see this part especially. Here and here and here. These are very densely built areas. In this part, you have a historic Jewish ghetto from the 17th century. When they had to leave during the reign of Leopold I, is also when the area got its name, Leopoldstadt. I think he was not a particularly popular emperor. From the things I've heard, he was a bit of a questionable character. But he gave his name to the suburb and to today's district. Traberstraße was one very important street already at the time. You can see here you have the Ferdinandsbrücke, so a bridge across the canal. Today that would be Schwedenbrücke. And this was the main road towards Bohemia, so northwards from Vienna. However, apparently the most beautiful street was Jägerzeil, which really surprises me. This today is Praterstraße, and I would not call this a particularly impressive street in terms of its buildings or shops. It leads up to Praterstern, so the star, you can see it here with the different roads leading out in all directions. A bit of a Baroque ideal. Very, very busy underground and train station today. And then in the other sections we have the Prater. This became open to everyone in the 18th century, middle of the 18th century. Before that, those were hunting grounds of the imperial family. A lot of it is still meadow, basically, today. So I'm having a bit of a hard time really finding where what is, because this has changed a lot. Of course, the Danube's been regulated. We have a train station, I think, in this area, where a lot of building is happening at the moment. We have the Stoverviertel, I think this should be in this direction. This would be Vorgartenstraße leading north across the Danube. And then if you continue here, you would get, for example, to the stadium, to a new university. So lots of new buildings. And on the other side, there's another garden, the Augarten, which I think you also already know. This is where you find two of the flag towers today. But of course, at the time, this was just a beautiful Baroque garden where classic concerts happened during the warm season. very, very beautiful area even today. So this has been really beautifully preserved and includes this corner here as well. There's also the Augarten porcelain manufacture, so you can get ceramics from this place here. And the Wiener Sängerknaben are in this area. It's very cultured. And if you come into the second district on a visit to Vienna, I would really recommend taking a stroll up here and then maybe around the corner. I can't quite find where it is, but there's a market too. I think it should be here. Karmelitermarkt. I think this is Karmeliter Church. Let's see if we find some information on this here. Pfarrkirche der Karmeliter an der Taborstraße. I think it's this one. Very beautiful. There's some really nice restaurants around the corner too. And just generally a lovely area to explore. This is Landstraße, the third district. We'll jump this one. And instead, let's have a look at the fourth and fifth. So at the time, this was the fourth district, Wieden. And you would say, if you live there, for example, you would say you live auf der Wieden and not in Wieden. This is one of the little oddities that I learned quite late after I moved to Vienna. This is basically south of the inner district. The inner district would be here. So you would have the walls here, and then there would be Kärntnerstraße. The most impressive building, without a doubt, is right here. Carolus Pfarrkirche, simply called Karlskirche, so Charles Church today. And you can tell this is a massive building with a very high cupola here. It was built early 18th century, so after the second siege of the Ottoman Empire. And I don't know if this is like an urban legend. Sometimes you hear people say that the way it was built sort of to mimic a mosque with the two minarets, but again, I don't know if that's actually true. It might have been fashionable for other reasons at the time. But really massive church, quite impressive when you walk up the stairs here. And you can see that there's a lot of open space around it. You have a shallow pool in front of it today, and then a park with plenty of benches to sit down, a playground for children. This is really, really popular anytime it's warm. Especially last year, a lot of young people came there to celebrate out in the open air. And just across you have a university building today. Right here, the Technical University. I think that building is from 1900, so it's not included yet. Frankly, I think it's one of the uglier buildings in the area. And the other, I think at the time, really important building was right here, the Theresianum. Don't know if you can see it. It says K und K, always meaning it's of the imperial family. This building was called Favorita, and it was the summer residence of the Habsburgs. Eventually, it was too close to the inner city and it got too hot, so they built Schönbrunn further out and turned this into a school. It's still a school today. And I've never been inside, so I'm not sure. But I think that it's very similar to what we see on the map here. If you walk around it, along Favoritenstraße here, it's quite a far away along the wall. Even if you turn the corner here, this is all a wall along the gardens or parks. I'm not quite sure what's behind it. They might have kept it the same way. You can sort of look over a little bit from the other side, but I'm not quite sure what you find there. This is quite nice here too. There's a church today, which is a Protestant church if I'm not mistaken. And then here, on the side of the 4th district, this is pretty much a hard border. You have another wall, and on the other side you find the Belvedere with its gardens. So there's only, I think, one entrance from the 1st district to the outer belt. And then here today you would find the main train station, but that's a long way out from that time. At the time we have a couple of other Sommerpalais, so palais by other royal families. I think it was quite a popular area. Today most of this the typical inner district in Vienna, most of the houses are from around 1900, something like 5 stories high, and especially out here where it's all green at the time, this is really, really dense. This is the 5th district today, so these 2 districts got split apart eventually, and this is the inner district with the least amount of green space, so complete opposite from what we see here. And we can see a little bit of what we have here in the population today as well. The 4th district, so this part, had all of these palais, had the summer residence of the Habsburgs, this massive, impressive church. So this is quite bougie, basically. And out here you would later have a typical workers' district. And here along the Matzleinsdorf area, you have some of the earliest urban housing projects of Red Vienna later. I've talked a little bit about that before. So diverging developments for the 2 parts of Wien, or Wien at the time. And the border here, we have the Wien River, Wienfluss, today with the U4 line along it. So again, a clear border for the district. And then if we go a little bit inside, we can see the Schlossplatz here. This is quite lovely. So today you would, I think you would walk straight across like this, and it would be called Pilgrimgasse. This is a bit confusing here because the streets largely follow the same route that they have today, but they have different names. So Bräuhausgasse would be somewhere else. Lange Gasse is the name of a street in the 9th district. We have 2 Wiener Hauptstraße here, an old and a new one. This doesn't exist in this form. Reinbrechtsdorfer Straße is this street today rather than this one. So it took me a while to find where exactly I am on this map. But Schlossplatz is really nice. So you can get there straight from the underground station. It's called Margaretenplatz now. And this is the Schloss, the castle. It's a little complex of 2-story buildings, so much lower than the rest of this area. I'm guessing they still look the same. You can see that they are very, very close to one another. And you can walk through in between. You can walk between the houses. There's large inner courtyards. And there's a lot of restaurants in there. So there's a restaurant back here. There's a pizzeria in here. Burger place here. And they all have, seats in their courtyards. It's really, really nice. And then when you walk around the back, there's some newer buildings, but they fit in really nicely. They're also quite low, with some gardens and terraces, and then you can continue out here. Here in Mittersteig is where I usually go thrifting, where I find all of my maps. There's a big warehouse with secondhand stuff for charity, so that's really cool. But yeah, this is really nice. And then this part here is really interesting too. They rebuilt this into a residential block that looks a little Victorian, I think. So completely different again, with an iron gate on both sides and little towers. Very beautiful. And one thing, maybe the last thing I'm going to mention, because I think I've been talking for quite a while here. But what's really fascinating, if we're looking at this street, this is Margaretenstraße today. You can see that it's not running straight. You're always having these corners going back and forth. And this hasn't changed. However, these streets going off on the sides, they're completely straight. You know exactly where you are and where you're going. And the reason is that Margaretenstraße is an older street, so it developed somewhat more naturally between the suburbs. While these here are newer and were planned to really make the most of the space. For me, the inner districts are usually quite easy when you want to find your way. There's the ring on one side and the belt on the other side, and you have a connection between the two. And then in between, there's always straight lines, one straight to the next. But of course, sometimes you'll have a district like the 4th and the 5th. Suddenly there'll be an older street, just, taking some turns, including some corners. Or maybe 2 streets like these suddenly diverging at an angle that can make it a little more difficult. But I really like this area, especially up here. In Schleifmühlgasse, you'll often have a summer festival where for 2 days the whole street is blocked for cars. You can sit anywhere, there's music, and you can get really nice food and drinks. And the heat becomes a little more bearable in the city. And I think it's always fascinating to see how it's changed and how some things have been the same for a very, very long time. And you can find the traces of the past in the way the streets run. So, I hope you enjoyed this little exploration of Vienna today. I'll see you again next week for something vaguely Easter related. And then we're going to move on to some French language exploration. Alright, so I hope you sleep well. And I'll see you again on Wednesday.